Hi, I'm Stassi Schroeder. On my podcast, I share candid updates from my personal life, chat with some of my best friends about what's going on in our lives, give commentary on the latest pop culture headlines, and sometimes deep dive into random topics I'm obsessed with, like human design. It's a bit all over the place, but that's how I like it. And you will too. Listen to my podcast, Stassi, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 394 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. I'm just sitting here chilling.
You just chilling?
Just chilling.
As we record this episode?
Yeah.
Okay. Do people still use the word chilling a lot?
Oh, every day.
Okay.
It's very popular.
I just want to make sure. Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Rizza.
Hey, Rizza.
Astrid Cox.
What's going on, Cox?
Brooke Marshall.
Hey, Marshall.
Lee Linder.
Well, thanks, Linder.
Jumped out to our highest level. Kathy.
Hey, Kathy.
Jimmy Schneider.
Hey, appreciate that, Schneider.
Michelle Carmichael.
Hey, Carmichael.
Miranda B.
What's up, B?
Sally Shepman.
Hey, Shepman in the house.
Tyler 1015M.
What's going on, Tyler?
And last but not least, the Machinist Gardner.
The Machinist.
How about that?
Yeah.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Jeff Harden Jr.
Well, thanks, Harden Jr.
Yeah. Appreciate the new Patreon support, the continued support. It's all amazing.
Love it.
So Gibbs, right now we have a brand new episode out on True Crime All the Time where we're talking about Canadian serial killer Bruce McArthur. This is a guy who, is a grandfather, worked as a landscaper, even worked as a mall Santa in the off season.
Kind of timely right now.
Yeah, it is. But for nearly 8 years, McArthur lived a secret life as a serial killer, primarily targeting men in the gay village, an LGBTQ plus friendly area of Toronto.
I think I'll bring this whole story up when I go see Santa at the mall.
Okay.
I go get my yearly picture done.
Why you still do that at your advanced age, I do not know. You get a lot of funny looks because you're the only person in line. You're sitting on Santa's lap. It's a strange thing.
Sometimes I think I'm Santa. Like, why do you think I'm Santa?
Because you have a white beard. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
We're talking about the murder of Bella Wright. On June 5th, 1919, Bella Wright was riding her bicycle to visit a relative when she encountered a man on a green bicycle. Multiple witnesses saw the two of them riding together that evening. Hours later, Bella's body was found on a road near a farm. She had been shot in the head. Months later, the police identified the man on the green bicycle as 34-year-old Ronald Light.
1919, I'm guessing bicycle travel was more popular than today.
I would say a lot of people still rode bicycles. Not that they don't today, but it's, at least where we live, more recreational.
Yeah, leisure.
It's more of a leisure activity. Yeah, I know in New York City and places like that, people ride bikes to work. They ride bikes as messengers, and at least in that movie Quicksilver they did. Remember that?
Oh, I do. Yeah. Yeah.
Who was in Quicksilver?
That Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. You know what else they ride in New York? Horses. When they make the pace salsa.
They don't make it in New York. Somebody keeps reaching out to me saying, please make Gibby stop saying they make the salsa in New York. The whole point is they make it down south. They're making fun of New York for some reason.
Yeah. You're getting another call now.
Some other type of salsa.
Yeah.
But this is a strange start to an unsolved case.
It is.
I mean, we have a victim, which we often do in our unsolved episodes, but it's very rare that we're, saying police identified, this person who was with the victim right before they died. Annie Bella Wright was just 21 years old when she died. She came from a farming family in Leicestershire, a ceremonial county in England. She lived with her parents in a cottage in the village of Stoughton. So both of our episodes this week are outside of the U.S.
Yes, across the pond.
We're in Canada for TCAT, and we're in England for Unsolved.
Both countries have a tie-in with the Queen.
Okay, I like that. I like that you're bringing it back around. Historian Roger Lovell told the BBC that although Bella was a farmer's daughter and lived in a rural area, she had a job, a social life, and freedom. Millions of British men were drafted during the First World War, which opened up job opportunities for young women like Bella. She worked as a maid until 1917 when she got a job at a rubber factory. Bella had to bike 5 miles every day to get to work. She was often seen biking on rural roads in her free time.
I used to like to bike.
I did too when I was a kid.
You probably had one of those chopper bikes.
No, never had one of those. But most of my biking, I think, was done once I got my driver's license and a car.
You moved on.
I moved on. Bella had been seeing a sailor who was expected to be demobilized in August 1919. It was thought she was going to marry him, but she spoke to her mother about meeting an army officer shortly before she died. So, let's go back to World War I. Obviously both world wars were, just horrific in scope.
Sure.
Of both how many people fought and how many people died. But think about, this millions of British men being drafted. And we kind of saw the same thing here in the U.S. in World War II. A lot of men went overseas to fight, and a lot of women stepped into the workplace.
Sure, they had to
fill the void, right? To keep everything going. That's where Rosie the Riveter came from. On June 4th, 1919, Bella worked the late shift at the rubber mill and got home at 11 p.m. She woke up around 4 p.m. on July 5th, wrote some letters, and went to the post office to buy stamps. She came home quickly and left again at 6:30 p.m. Okay. Now, I sleep late, but 4 p.m., that is really sleeping in. I get it. You're working the late shift, but you're still getting off at 11. She must have been a night owl or something.
Maybe she got home from work and that's like her evening time.
For those of us who work like a first shift. Yeah, I get it. Some people do it like that.
And then she had to write some letters,
Well, of course. Bella returned from the post office sooner than expected because she encountered a neighbor on her way who offered to take the letters for her. And when we do these older cases, things come up that, it's just so much that we take for granted today. I mean, obviously we don't write as many letters as they did back then, but just think about, mailing something. Well, you just have to walk out to the mailbox. Okay. Sounds like she didn't have a mailbox. She had to bike to the post office.
Probably what you did back then where she lived. You had to go pick up your mail from the local post office and then drop your mail off too.
But there was a neighbor, right, who offered to take the letters. Bella accepted the offer because she wanted to visit her cousin, who was staying at her uncle's home in Galby, a few miles away from Stoughton. Her cousin brought her newborn, and Bella wanted to see the baby.
Who doesn't want to see a new baby?
Hey, I actually told my oldest last night that I think I am ready to be a grandpa. I told her I'm not trying to rush you. I'm not trying to speed up the process by any means, but I am getting older.
You just want to share the same hairstyle with somebody.
Yes, exactly. I want I'm sure the kid will be born with more hair than what I have. It was a cloudy day, and at the last minute, Bella stopped at home to get her raincoat. On her way there, Bella encountered a man on a green bicycle. He rode beside Bella and was still with her when she arrived at her uncle's house between 7 and 8 p.m. And it's been reported that she seemed uncomfortable with this man. The Leicester Evening Mail reported in 1919. She was then in the company of a man who was also riding a bicycle. The man did not enter her uncle's house with her, but walked up and down outside. She told her relatives that the man had overtaken her on the road, had asked the way to some village she didn't know, and then continued to ride along with her. When told by her friends that the man was outside watching for her, she said, "Oh, I shan't go then yet." But she left at 8 o'clock, riding off in the company of the man in the direction of Stretton and Stoughton.
You know, so for me, I've had that happen a few times when you're doing something and somebody comes up to you and they talk to you a little bit and you're like, okay. And you leave and then they want to leave with you. So they just kind of follow you, as you're walking or riding or whatever, right there. And you're like, you want to like not be rude, but you're kind of like,
no, see, I never have that problem. I just say, get the, away from me.
Yeah.
No, but I know what you're saying. It's like they think they found somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
And they want to continue that conversation, and you've tried to end it. You thought you ended it and it didn't work.
Right.
I thought you were going to say, I've had that many times where a man on a green bicycle has overtaken me, and then we end up riding together.
But I'm also surprised that nobody in her family said, let me go out and speak to this guy.
Yeah, I get you there because I feel like you and I would both do that.
Yeah.
Hey, where are you waiting outside? What's going on? Now, the following details will become critical. Later on in this case, George Measures, Bella's uncle, didn't like the man lingering outside his home. He thought Bella seemed too familiar with him. Bella reassured him she didn't know the man. It seemed like Bella wanted to wait until the man left before departing her uncle's house. But she also wanted to get home before dark. They couldn't see the man outside, and Bella appeared relieved. But as she turned to leave, the man appeared and said, "Bella, you've been a long time. I thought you had gone the other way." Bella's cousin was concerned and pulled her aside while her husband spoke to the man about his bike. Bella reassured her cousin she had just met the man. Bella and the stranger left together around 8:50 p.m. and were last seen pushing their bikes up Golby Lane. At the top of the hill, Bella waved goodbye to her family, got on her bike, and disappeared. So, it does seem as though, she's telling everyone she just met this man. She's not crazy about him. And she seemed relieved that he was no longer outside waiting on her.
Right.
But as soon as she goes to leave, he
appears.
He appears. He does a kind of pops up. But you also get from her family, they have this sneaking suspicion that she does know this man.
But not disclosing it to him.
Right. I mean, I don't want to say they thought she was lying, but multiple people there said that the man seemed more familiar to her than what she was letting on. Just 30 minutes later, Bella's body was found on Gartree Road near a farm. Bella was lying close to a gate. Her bike was overturned nearby. The Evening Mail reported the dead body of a young woman cyclist was found on the roadside near Stretton Parva on Saturday afternoon. The first conclusion arrived at was that she had fallen from her bicycle and had been killed. Later on, after a closer examination, it was established beyond doubt that she had been murdered. She had apparently been shot in the left cheek. The bullet passed upwards through the head and had come out on the right side of the crown. Okay, sounds brutal.
It does.
Now, they said first conclusion, fell off the bicycle and died. Is that possible? Yes, it is possible. Is it likely? No, most people who fall off their bicycle don't die. But without any other evidence, all they know is that she's dead and her bicycle's lying. So,
Yeah, but as they do a closer evaluation, then they determine.
well, pretty easy to see.
Yeah.
She got a gunshot wound to the face. A man identified as Mr. Cow of Elms Farm, Little Stretton, found Bella face down on the road. Her body was still warm. Her face was covered with blood. It was Mr. Cow who concluded that she fell off her bike. Now, he wasn't certain she was dead, so he picked her up and started carrying her to his house. He realized she was dead when her head fell back. So he put her down by the side of the road, went home, and drove to get Police Constable Alfred Hall. Mr. Cowell and Constable Hall moved Bella's body to an unoccupied cottage. So we talk a lot, right, you and I, about someone finding a body. Now, a lot of times it's well after the person has died.
Yes.
Somebody walking or hiking or doing whatever stumbles upon bones. But this is someone who is finding a body not long after the person has been killed. The body is still warm. And it's, to the point where this person thinks she's still alive. I got to get her some help, but then quickly realizes, no, she's not alive. A doctor made a superficial examination and concluded Bella fell off her bike. So multiple people, but here's a doctor making that conclusion.
Somebody that has more experience in something like this.
But here's what I don't get. Even a superficial examination, you think would reveal a gunshot wound to the face.
I'm thinking the blood must have been pretty heavy.
Yeah, maybe it covered it up. That's a good point. Police Constable Hull woke up early on July 6th and searched the area where Bella was found. He discovered a bullet about 5 meters from Bella's bike. He saw blood by the gate and claw marks from a crow, which was lying dead in a nearby field. Constable Hall believed the crow made numerous trips to and from Bella's body to drink her blood, as the bloody tracks were still visible. Okay, that's a kind of a gruesome thought, but
really is.
I mean, we know animals scavenge. Don't really think much about birds drinking blood, but hey. Constable Hall returned to the cottage where Bella's body was being kept. He wiped away the blood from her face, revealing what he believed was a gunshot wound. So you were right on the money. There was so much blood that it was completely obscuring this gunshot wound.
Well, I did have medical training since the age of 12, so. Well, you're right. That's got to be a lot of volume of blood there.
Well, and it also means that in the initial examination that was called superficial, the doctor didn't wipe any of that blood away. Constable Hall called the doctor again, who conducted another exam and found an entrance wound on Bella's left cheek and an exit on the right crown of her head. It was thought that she was shot from a distance of 2 meters and was riding her bike when she was shot. For those of us here in the States, 2 meters is about 6.5 feet. And all right, is that the distance that you might be riding next to someone on another bicycle? Possibly.
Yeah.
According to the Leicester Evening Mail, the bullet in the possession of the police was obviously fired from a pistol or revolver of large caliber. And I'm assuming they determined that by the size of the wounds, but they also had a bullet that was found.
And that would be easier to use as well by the shooter if they're riding bikes side by side.
As opposed to a small caliber?
Or to a rifle.
Oh, you mean a pistol?
Yes.
As opposed to, yeah, much easier to shoot than to try to extend a rifle, I guess. Bella's family was extremely worried when she didn't come home, and they were devastated when they received the news that she was dead. And again, whether it's 1919 or 2024. This is the part of the story that never changes and never will. You know, when your loved one doesn't come home, you don't hear from them.
Yeah.
Well, you become worried. Now, what is a little different, I think, with this story is that Bella was found so very quickly. So there wasn't that extended period of worry where, you know, where could she be? Where has she gone? There was the initial worry, but then sadly, pretty quickly, they were notified that she had been found dead. And not just dead, but shot and killed, murdered. The case was major news around the entire country. The police were seeking the man with the green bicycle who was last seen with Bella. As reported by the Evening Mail, it is asserted that a man of the description published by the police yesterday was seen on Sunday at the spot where the murder was committed, and it's added that he appeared to be trying to find something. At that time, the suspicion of murder had not taken shape. So, you know, we already talked about the fact that some members of Bella's family saw this guy, but then somebody must have seen him later on out by this farm where Bella was found. But at the time, there wasn't that thought that she'd been murdered. On July 10th, local papers reported that because of the detailed description, the police received a tip from a bike repair shop. The owner claimed he made repairs to a green bike matching the description. The man visited the repair shop the week before the murder. His bike needed extensive repairs, so he had to leave it there and didn't pick it up until July 5th. Now, you talked about the fact that a lot of people were probably riding bikes at this point in time. Now, I don't know if everybody could afford a bike. I don't know how expensive they were, but how many people had green bikes? How many people lived in this area?
There's no guarantee this is the bike they're looking for.
No guarantee, but it's a good tip, right? You want all those types of tips. On February 23rd, 1920, a barge snagged part of the green bicycle on the bottom of a canal. The captain was aware of the case and contacted the police right away. The canal was dredged and all part of the bikes were found except for the rear wheel. The police also found an Army-issued holster in the canal, but not the gun. Inside the holster were bullets that matched the one at the crime scene.
Oh, that's impressive.
It is. When you think of 1919 and you think of the type of police work that had to be done and what they had to work with, I do think it's very impressive. Someone had filed down the serial number on the green bicycle, but the manufacturer BSA found remnants of a number that revealed the bike was ordered by a shop in Leicester in 1910 with a special request for a coasting brake on the back wheel. The shopkeeper had detailed records and informed the police that a man named Ronald Light purchased the bike. So again, I mean, you know, we're talking about the type of police work that is still done today.
Right.
Probably harder back then, obviously, because of the lack of technology. There's records, but they're not digital. So it has to be harder.
Plus, there's a little bit of luck here, right?
That the owner still has the records, kept detailed records. Yeah, absolutely. But it wasn't like this bike was bought the year of the murder. It was bought 9 years before the murder occurred. So, you know, it's kind of amazing. And the fact that they, you know, could narrow down who exactly bought it. Ronald Light was soon arrested at a local school where he was working. Ronald Light came from an upper class family. His father was an engineer and inventor. Ronald was the only one of his siblings to survive past infancy. Because of this, his parents spoiled him. And it's sad to think of, but, you know, what was the survival rate on babies back then?
Well, especially for his family, it sounds like it was really low.
Yeah. We don't know how many siblings he had, but there were some early signs of extremely troubling behavior. Ronald was expelled from school as a teenager for undressing a young girl. Okay, I would call that extremely troubling behavior.
I would too.
He later earned a degree at Birmingham University and got a job as a draftsman for a railway company. Ronald was fired after setting fire to a cupboard and drawing indecent graffiti on the bathroom wall. A few months later, he was caught setting a haystack on fire.
Clearly, he had some issues.
Well, we said troubling behavior. Now, he's older now, right? He's out of college. But the fire setting, we know from all the episodes that we've done on TCAT that can be an indicator of bad things to come. Now, it could just be that someone likes to set fires and they're never going to hurt anybody ever. But I don't know what you make of the drawing of the indecent graffiti.
I'd have to see it.
To see what level of indecency we're talking about?
Yes.
He returned to Leicester in October 1914 and joined the Royal Engineers, a corps of the British Army that provides technical and engineering support to the armed forces. During the First World War, Light became second lieutenant in the Royal Engineers. However, on July 1st, 1916, he relinquished his role and was demoted to the lower ranks of the army because of a rumor that he sexually assaulted a woman. So we have the fire setting and we have some troubling accounts of sexual assault.
We do.
Now, this was said to be a rumor.
But when you tie it into the schoolgirl thing when he was younger, maybe this is something that he has an issue with.
Well, it did seem strange to me that he was demoted based on a rumor. Maybe there was a little bit more to it than what we know. A few weeks later, Ronald's father died after he fell off a balcony at his home. The incident was recorded as an accident, but it was suspected that his father died of suicide because he was shamed by his son's demotion.
That would be hard to live with.
If you're Ronald?
Yes.
Yeah, if you knew for sure that your dad killed himself because of something you did, for most people, that would be extremely hard to live with. Now, if you're a stone cold killer, if you're a sociopath, maybe not so much.
But think about the dad that had to, if he stopped at the local pub, how they probably gave him a hard time.
Well, you go from being extremely proud of your son because he's doing this, he's doing that, to having to answer questions about it. I'm sure it got around pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That he was demoted and why he was demoted. In 1917, Ronald was court-martialed for forging movement papers. He was medically discharged from the army due to shell shock and partial deafness. He was advised to get plenty of fresh air.
Well, they did that back then. You need a lot more fresh air.
Yeah, I don't know how medically sound that is. I mean, everybody should get plenty of fresh air, but is that a treatment for shell shock and partial deafness? I would say no. Light joined the artillery company, a reserve regiment, and was demobilized in February 1919. In January 1920, Ronald shifted careers and became an assistant teacher at the Cheltenham School. When the police first questioned Ronald about Bella Wright, he said he had nothing to do with her death and never owned a green bike. The police showed him the receipt for the bike with his signature on it. He admitted he did buy the bike, but said he sold it to a British Army officer in 1916 and could no longer remember the man's name.
Convenient.
Well, and again, Gibbs, whether you're talking about a story that happened in 1919 or a story that happened present day, here you have a guy who lies to the police. Why does he lie? Probably because he figures there's no way they can prove that he owned a green bike.
Yeah, he probably shit himself when he found out that they knew.
That they found a receipt from 1910.
Yeah.
And what happens? Okay, now I have this information. My lie doesn't work. I have to shift gears.
Exactly.
And it's the same thing we hear in case after case. And it's been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years. It just doesn't change, right? People are going to try to get out of any situation, especially a situation like this, and they're going to do it by coming up with as many different stories as they have to combat the evidence presented against them.
Yeah, the problem is, will they remember all the different stories?
When he learned that multiple witnesses saw him with Bella, he then admitted he was with her. Again, confronted by the evidence, the story has to change.
Yeah.
Because your original story no longer works. You have to come up with a new one. Ronald claimed it was a chance encounter. He saw Bella on the side of the road attempting to fix her bike and stopped to help. Afterwards, they rode together and had a nice conversation. So not only is he changing his story, but now he's the hero of the story, right? He is stopping to help this young woman who's in distress. She's got a problem with her bike.
And it's amazing how much detail he has now.
I wasn't with her at all. No, I was. And I stopped to help her. We had this great conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you look in the eyes of the police?
Not good.
No, once you're caught in that first lie, and this isn't even his first lie, this is his second lie, right? I didn't own a green bike. I was never with Bella. He's caught in two lies already.
Oh, wait, I did own a green bike. Oh, yeah, I was with her. And let me tell you what we did that day.
How are the police going to believe anything that comes out of your mouth after, being caught up in multiple lies already? He acknowledged he didn't leave her uncle's cottage after she went inside. When she left the house, they rode together from Galby to the nearest crossroads. He said he turned right and she turned left, and he never saw her again.
Hard to believe, though, since you couldn't recall it earlier.
Well, but if that was the first story that came out of his mouth, maybe it's believable. But to me, after you're caught in all of these lies, then I would struggle with that. Ronald claimed he didn't learn Bella was dead for several days until he overheard a conversation between his mother and their mate. He realized he was a suspect, so he began to dispose of evidence. He hid his green bicycle for months. During the winter, he went to a canal and threw his bike into the water. All he kept was the back wheel with the coasting brake.
Because he paid extra for that.
Yeah. I mean, probably most bikes wouldn't have that. That was a special thing, right? That he ordered with the bike, and that would help identify. Over the next several weeks, he sold the clothing he was wearing on the evening of Bella's death. He then accepted a job as a math teacher at the school in Cheltenham. So, I mean, we have to break this down. He learns, according to him, that Bella was dead and assumes that he's going to be a suspect. So because of that, he goes into full cover-up mode.
Yeah.
First hiding the bike, then throwing it in the canal, getting rid of the clothing he was wearing that night. Why would he need to get rid of the clothing?
I'm thinking because people seen him in that clothes and wanted to make sure that if he didn't have them, he could say, well, it wasn't me. I don't own a whatever color shirt, whatever color pants.
Or is it possible that the clothing he was wearing that night could have had blood on it or something like that?
Could have. But if you're going to get rid of clothing, why not just burn it? Why make the effort to sell it where it can be found again later?
Well, that's true. Yeah. I mean, if he sold it, less likely that it would have had blood on it, or he would have somehow figured out how to clean it to the point where he could sell it. But you're probably more accurate when you say he just doesn't want to have it in his possession if the description comes out, right, of what someone was wearing. After he threw out the evidence, he realized there was no going back. He didn't want to go to the police because he didn't want to upset his sick mother. And he had no information to offer about Bella's death. So there's a whole bunch of things that he has to explain, especially when faced with, the evidence that the police have. But one of these things is, okay, after you admit you had the green bike, you were with Bella, and you learned of her death, why didn't you come forward?
Yeah.
You have to explain that. And his explanation is that he didn't want to upset his sick mother. And by the way, he didn't have any information to add or tell the police about her death anyway. On March 5th, 1920, Ronald Light was formally charged with murder. The press was sympathetic towards him because he was a former military officer. Papers called Bella a, quote, factory girl. And one paper even questioned her virtue.
And how wrong is that?
Oh, it's terrible. But let's face it, it's something that exists to this day. I mean, how often do we see victim blaming, right? Whether it's talking about what someone was wearing or what line of work they were in or, something along those lines. And I can imagine that it was even worse back in 1920 because of how men were viewed versus women.
Of course. But even if this paper was right about Bella, it doesn't justify what happened to her.
No, and it never does. And that's why, the victim blaming is so bad. Ronald Light's murder trial started in June 1920. According to the Leicester Mercury, the Attorney General told the court that Bella was shot through the head. The bullet was found at the scene. There was no blacking around Bella's wound, which indicated she was shot from several feet away. There were no other injuries or signs of sexual assault. The prosecution argued that Bella rejected Ronald's sexual advances and tried to escape down the road where she was found. Ronald followed her and shot her with his former service revolver. Now, we've talked a lot about, Ronald lying and not looking good. But the prosecution's argument, you would have to say, Gibbs, is pretty speculative.
Yeah, that's all it is, really.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It definitely could have happened that way. But how are you going to prove that? The prosecution presented a gun expert who testified that Bella could have been shot from a distance by a rifle, which hurt their case. And obviously that was a really bad move on the part of the prosecution.
Yeah, that didn't help.
No, because, what's that old adage? You never put someone on the stand and ask them a question that you don't already know the answer to.
That's true.
So they either didn't do the homework up front, right, in talking to this guy, because they're presenting him as a gun expert.
Or this guy changed his story, which is kind of doubtful, right?
Yeah, most people don't, but yeah, it's possible. On the afternoon of July 5th, before Bella encountered Ronald Light, two young girls were riding their bikes on a road leading away from Leicester and saw a man riding towards them. He smiled and spoke to them. After passing them, he turned around and followed them and overtook them. The girls left him standing near a farm gate on the road. They both said he was riding a green bike. And this is the second time that this word overtook has been used. Overtake, overtaken, that has a number of different meanings.
It does.
But normally when you're in a vehicle or on a vehicle, it means you caught up to somebody and passed them or something along those lines. One of the girls picked Ronald Light out of a lineup of 12 men, and she also identified him in court. Okay. Again, that doesn't make him look good.
It kind of makes it look like he was stalking several girls that day.
Yeah, it definitely does. But does it mean that he shot and killed Bella Wright? And I think that's the ultimate question. And we talk about it in so many trials that we cover, there's what you think happened. There's the evidence that you have that supports what you think happened. And then there's whether or not that evidence conclusively proves that what you think happened, and that this person did it. The prosecution presented evidence that Ronald purchased a green bike in May 1910. Enoch Arthur Whitehouse, a canal boatman, testified that on February 23rd, his tow rope snagged a portion of a green bike. It fell back into the water, but he found it in the same spot the next day, as well as the frame and front wheel. Joseph Chambers, a laborer, testified that on April 30th, he was assisting with the dredging of the canal and found the left crank and pedal of the bike. A police sergeant testified that he discovered the revolver holster and multiple cartridges in the canal. So, I mean, they've got a ton of evidence. Now, it's all damning to some degree. I think, the question is, to what degree? And is it going to be enough to convict him?
I think it's a tough sell.
Well, I'll put it to you. If you're a juror, and again, I'm sure we haven't talked about all the evidence, but just weighing the evidence we have talked about, would you be comfortable convicting someone of murder based on this evidence? And I think there are going to be different opinions.
Yeah.
Some listeners are going to say, yeah, I'm good with it. And some are going to say, no.
We just had a little bit more concrete evidence. I mean, I feel like he did it.
Oh, absolutely.
But to convict, I just feel like just need a little bit more weight behind some things.
Well, and I think that's the trouble with many cases, right? The burden of proof exists for a reason. The police could be 99.9% sure. They could be 100% sure that someone did it. But are they able to put together enough evidence to get a conviction? Or can the prosecution? The defense argued that Ronald had no motive to kill Bella, implying that a man of a higher class like him would have no interest in a girl like Bella.
Oh, I hate when they say things like that.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't say it, right? They're implying it. But, let's talk about motive. If he made a sexual advance and was spurned, would that be a motive? Possibly. So I don't think you could say he wouldn't have any motive because he would have no interest in a girl like Bella. Obviously, he had some level of interest to ride with her, to wait around for her.
Exactly.
To leave her, relative's place and then to continue riding on with her. If you don't have some level of interest, you're not putting in that time.
No, you keep riding forward and don't look back.
Right, and go somewhere else. Ronald hired Sir Edward Marshall Hall, a top defense attorney. Hall argued that Ronald's only crime was failing to come forward. He also noted that the girls who claimed they saw Ronald on the road on July 5th were asked to identify him almost a year later, so their testimony could not be trusted.
Because they not remembering correctly?
Well, I would say the more time that goes by, the harder identifications can be. But if someone is adamant and they pick somebody out of a lineup, I guess you have to go with that. But again, even that doesn't prove that he killed Bella. It just proves he was out there. But he admitted he was out there.
Yeah.
Now, you could take from it that he was kind of harassing / stalking young girls, young women, but I think that's about it. Hall suggested that the bullet found at the crime scene could have come from a rifle and bore the marks of a ricochet. He also noted that such a large bullet fired at close range would have caused a larger wound. He raised the possibility that Bella was killed accidentally by someone who was shooting animals in the fields.
The possibility. Wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, it does go against the thought that she was shot from 6-7 feet away. But you did have the prosecution's own gun expert testify that it was possible she was shot from a rifle. So when you get into the area, Gibbs, of something like reasonable doubt, does, that possibility give someone reasonable doubt? And it very well could. The defense claimed that Bella's uncle was mistaken when he said Bella seemed familiar with Ronald. And we said earlier that when Bella departed her uncle's house, the family heard the stranger say to her, "Bella, you have been a long time. I thought you had gone the other way." However, the defense claimed that Ronald did not refer to Bella by name. Outside the cottage, all he said was hello. Finally, the defense claimed that the missing service revolver was never found because it was never in England. Ronald left it in France when he resigned from the army. However, the jury heard that a friend of Ronald said he sent the revolver to her from France for safekeeping, and she gave it back to him in 1970. So, much in the way that Ronald did when he knew his lies weren't working, he had to craft a story. The defense has to do something very similar. They have to craft a narrative that kind of counteracts the prosecution's assertion.
Sure they do.
And what the prosecution is presenting as evidence. And how do they do that? By saying she could have been shot by a rifle. She could have been shot by someone hunting. The two didn't know each other. Ronald didn't say what the family claims that he said.
Yeah, that's the defense's job. And they're doing a pretty good job at it at this point.
Yeah, they're trying to counter pretty much everything. Ronald Light decided to testify at trial. During cross-examination, he testified that on the night of July 5th, his mother told him they would be eating dinner around 8 p.m. He left home with the intention of arriving at that time. He was having trouble with his own bike around 6:45 when he turned up the road and encountered a girl who was fixing her bike. After helping her, they rode together into the village of Galby. He claimed he told her where he came through, but he didn't tell her his name or where he lived, and she didn't tell him anything about herself. When asked why he didn't go straight home through the village, he said, "Per the Leicester Mercury, I rode around the triangle to see if I could see anything of her before going back the shortest route." He claimed he saw the girl at the gate where her body was found with some men, and he stopped. He also testified he was late getting home and arrived just before 10 p.m. So now on the stand, he's actually claiming that he saw Bella alive at the gate where her body was later found. And there were some other men there with her.
Yeah, maybe those were the men that harmed her.
But it's interesting because in none of the reporting did it say that he told this part of the story, during his police interviews.
So it sounds like he's coming up with additional information to make himself look better.
It's entirely possible. Ronald was then confronted with the fact that he learned of Bella's murder on Tuesday, July 8th, 1919, and saw notices in the paper that the police were seeking a man with a green bike. He was asked why he didn't come forward and said, "Because at the first I was absolutely dazed about the whole thing, and I did not think clearly about it, and I could not make up my mind what to do." So that's kind of a strange answer. It's really like a nothing answer.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you had nothing to do with it. Why not just go to the police right away?
Well, he's saying he was dazed and couldn't make up his mind. But eventually, you must have made up your mind and come to the decision that you didn't want to go. Let's not forget, he told the detectives or the investigators that he didn't go to the police because he didn't want to upset his sick mother.
His story keeps changing.
Yeah, it's like an ever-evolving saga. On June 11th, 1920, the jury issued a shocking verdict. Ronald Light was acquitted of murder. Someone in the public gallery shouted, "Congratulations, Mr. Light." A large cheering crowd gathered outside the courthouse. When speaking to a reporter, Ronald said, "I have expected this verdict all along." He added that he was thankful the ordeal was over and wanted to go on a vacation. The following day, Ronald spoke to a Daily Mercury reporter at his home. He said, "Naturally, my first thoughts after my arrest were of the stupidity of my action in destroying my bicycle. It was a fatal mistake. To a man of some education, the seclusion of the prison cell is terrible. I think to a person of any level of education, a prison cell is terrible."
I don't think anybody's welcoming the prison cell.
And so what does he say? I was stupid in doing what I did, right? Hiding all the evidence. Now, he only says destroying the bicycle. He doesn't talk about the clothes and you know, the gun and all of that. But he testified that he didn't even have the gun, right? Or the defense put that forward. Although somebody did debunk that in their testimony.
Right.
Ronald said he was confident his innocence would be proven, but said at one point things looked black. After a couple hours of deliberation, he thought of the possibility of the jury disagreeing on a verdict, which made him cheerful. So he's acquitted, and he says that he pretty much expected that, but did admit that at a certain point, you know, things looked a little bleak. Now, after the verdict, there was a lot of speculation about what really happened to Bella. I guess many people believed in this crow theory. In 1943, writer Stuart Martin revisited the theory in his piece, Red Claw of the Carrion Crow. He wrote, Ronald Light was found not guilty at his trial. He deserved that verdict. He may have been foolish, but he was no murderer. The prosecution could not produce a motive. The bullet might have been fired from a service revolver, but it might also have been fired from a rifle. Suppose somebody was out rabbit shooting or bird shooting. On the white gate, a big crow rested, a sitting bird. From far across the field, the man with the rifle fired. The bullet went right through the crow and struck Bella Wright, who was cycling past at that moment. He continued writing, proof of all of this would have been available if P.C. Hall, amateur Sherlock Holmes, had lifted the dead bird and taken it for examination. Very good of P.C. Hall to have found the bullet, very good, but not quite Sherlock Holmes.
What do you make of that?
Well, you know, if you're measuring it on the plausibility meter, is it possible? Absolutely.
Yeah. Probably maybe at the right height. Makes sense.
But a lot of things are possible.
Sure.
You know, is that more likely than Ronald Light having killed her? I would say no.
But it caused reasonable doubt.
But just the fact that that possibility exists, that means there's not enough evidence to conclusively prove that he shot her. Now, you could say the preponderance of the evidence kind of shows it. It leans that way.
Right.
But obviously that was not enough for the jury.
And I think that's why the crowd outside cheered so heavily, because they realized he couldn't be found guilty based on the current evidence.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think they were cheering because most people probably went into this thing thinking that, you know, here's a military man. There's no way he would have done this. The papers have all painted Bella as this factory girl, they called her. They questioned her virtue. So if you're reading the paper, I think you're rooting for this guy.
Kind of a social class thing.
Yeah. There's no way for us to know who's right, but and it could be a mixture of both.
Sure.
Many years later, Ronald Light's confession was uncovered in police archives. A typewritten account states that 3 days after the acquittal, Ronald went to a police station to collect his belongings and spoke to an officer he was friendly with. Ronald allegedly said, I did shoot the girl, but it was completely accidental. We were riding quietly along. I had my revolver in my raincoat pocket, and we dismounted for her to look at it. I had no idea there was a loaded cartridge in it. Her hand was out to take it when it went off. She fell and never stirred. I got on my bicycle and rode away. He said he would deny the story if it ever went public, and the report was stored away for years. So, if that is really true, if he said that, it's possible it happened that way, or it's possible that he just killed her, but wanted to make it sound like an accident.
Sure. But we don't even know if this is what he said.
No, it's in a report, but who knows? After the acquittal, Ronald Light changed his name and moved to Kent. He had 2 more brushes with the law for inappropriate conduct towards a woman and a child. He got married and died at the age of 89. He lived to be 89.
Man, that's a long time.
Yeah, as we wrap this one up, Gibbs, this remains a controversial case over 100 years later. The questions are still debated around whether Ronald Light should have been convicted of murder, or was there just not enough evidence? And then what happened to Bella Wright on the night of July 5th, 1919? That question is still a mystery. I think from what we've discussed, you and I kind of lean the same way. I think Ronald Light had something to do with her death.
Right.
Whether it was a murder, whether the gun went off accidentally, his actions afterwards do nothing but make him look guilty. But I could see why a jury would have trouble convicting him solely based on what we talked about, because there just wasn't anything that was earth-shattering or, very conclusive.
Right. He also had the credibility of being an officer coming out of the war.
Yeah. And that might have, swayed the jury some. I'm sure it swayed some of his supporters outside. But, you look at the number of charges levied against him surrounding inappropriate conduct with women, children, young girls. I mean, none of that is good.
No.
Does it prove that he murdered her? No. But it makes me feel as though something went down. He tried something, and she possibly, rebuked him, and he got mad. But again, that's just a theory.
Yeah, there's no proof behind it.
I think what gets most people about this case is all the stuff he did afterwards.
Sure.
You tell all the lies, you get rid of a bunch of evidence. Why? Either because you're guilty, or it's because of what he said. And he said, well, I just thought they would think I was guilty, so I got rid of it anyway. It's one of those cases that we're never going to know at this point.
No, there's no way to know, right?
No, it's too many years. Everybody's dead that would have anything to do with the case.
Yeah.
And then you have this report that was filed away and found later where he allegedly admitted to the shooting, but said it was accidental. It either happened or it didn't. But if he did say that, do you believe it? Because he's told so many lies about this thing from the get-go.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I feel really bad for Bella Wright. She was only 21 years old.
Yeah, young.
She's just a young woman out riding her bike, visiting some family. The other part about this was, relatives saying that Ronald seemed familiar to Bella.
Yeah.
Almost as if there may have been more of a relationship than has ever been disclosed. I mean, we did say very early on that, she was seeing a sailor that she was expected to marry, or that her family thought she was going to marry. But she spoke to her mother about meeting an Army officer shortly before she died. There was nothing else about that.
Yeah.
Could that have been Ronald Light?
Could have been.
And therefore, if there's more of a relationship, then other possibilities for motives open up. But it's just a very interesting case that people are going to have to decide for themselves what they think. And that's, part of the interest in some researching and reviewing some of these older unsolved crimes. I think people are going to land on one side or the other.
You bring up the seller and the officer, so immediately in my head, I'm thinking maybe she told him that day that she wanted to stay with the seller, and he didn't like that. He said, "If I can't have you, nobody can have you."
Again, it opens up a bunch of different possibilities, right, for motives. But I don't know. It's a mystery, man. But that's it for our episode on Bella Wright. We got some voicemails, though. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hello, my name is Debbie Rose. I live in South Carolina now, but originally from Brookville, Ohio. And I found your podcast for the Buck and Linda Durst murders. And wanted to thank you. I remember Linda Durst's murder. She lived around the corner from me growing up. I was a year older than her. It was in all the papers, the coverage of her and Pearl Buck or Mrs. Buck. But I knew they never solved the crime. A couple months ago, my husband and I were at his 50th reunion, which is from Northmont High School, and Miss Durst's brother was there and did mention someone that they thought that had killed his sister, but didn't have enough evidence to prosecute. So I just wanted to thank you for the podcast. I've thought about this my whole life since I was 13. I'm now 66. And I remember being so scared at the time to be in my home because I lived out in the country too, around the corner from where this occurred. So thank you guys and keep on ticking. I love listening to your podcast. Bye.
Oh, thank you so much for calling in. So Brookville's very close to where I live.
Same here.
And were you at that reunion? Yes.
I was not. I did go to that same high school.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking.
Yeah, I'm just slightly younger, not much, but yeah.
So you have not been out of high school for 50 years.
I have not been out
I thought you had for some reason.
I have not.
Okay.
I have not, but yeah, I mean, even today I live probably less than, 10 minutes away from Brookville.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking of a different town. I do not live that close to Brookville because you and I don't live that close together.
You don't.
So I live a little farther away. But it was interesting that you went to the same high school.
Yeah,
as
a
her husband.
local connection.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, this is Michaela. I've never called in before, but I heard a voicemail talking about the massage therapist who listens to Unsolved and regular true crime while we're doing massages. And as a fellow massage therapist who listens to true crime podcasts, it is very awkward to be, please quit meowing, I'm trying to do a voicemail. It's very awkward to be in the middle of a massage. It's very relaxing, soothing music, and all of a sudden they're like, yes, and then they strangled them. It's kind of funny. Also, my husband, who I've been married to since I was in massage school, can literally count on less than one hand how many times he's actually gotten a massage from me because, no, not about that life. I was hoping that maybe you guys would consider doing the case for Jelani Day. It's an unsolved murder, probably murder. I don't know. It seems very suspicious, but his car was found literally like blocks from my home in Peru, and it's kind of scary, kind of creepy. We're in the Illinois Valley. It's not like we have a whole lot of crime over here, but here we are with an unsolved case from 2020. Anyway, love the show. Keep your own time ticking. Bye.
All right. Well, we'll definitely look into that case. But so what is the benefit of, being married to or dating a massage therapist? You're not getting any of the massages.
Absolutely nothing.
No.
The paycheck they bring home.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see how, a true crime podcast for some patrons might be a little jarring, but I guess you'd have to ask them if they were into true crime or not.
Yeah. Well, no massages for us.
For us, we weren't going to get any anyway. What are you talking about?
Now I'm thinking about massages, man. Like,
okay. Well, you can schedule one with a massage therapist.
That means I got to pay.
Yeah. You're not getting any free massages.
Oh, man. Well, I'm not going to pay for it.
No, that much I know. On that note, that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
I love reality TV on Pluto TV.
Same, and I love that it's free.
It gives me the freedom to watch Bravo's Real Housewives Vault channel.
I'm totally free to watch Bad Girls Club.
I'm free for Jersey Shore.
Love and Hip Hop, I'm free all day.
Survivor, I'm free all night.
With hundreds of free reality shows, you are totally free to watch what you love on Pluto TV.
Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.